Welcome to the Empower Her podcast. I'm Deanna, an ex-corporate manager turned certified coach, empowering you to create the life of your dreams. My goal is to guide you and support you in understanding what you really want in life, what steps to take to get there, and learn to actually enjoy the ride. Whether you are climbing the corporate ladder, a stay-at-home parent, or an entrepreneur, I coach you on how to believe you are worthy of a balanced, happy, and energetically positive life in work and at home. My goal in this podcast is to help you recognize patterns, implement change, and use your energy for positivity within yourself and your own life. I believe you don't have to suffer in this lifetime. You can create a life on your terms based on what you want, regardless of what that looks like. It is about reframing your beliefs, letting go of negative thoughts, and looking at your life as a set of opportunities there for you. I'm so excited to get started. Hello, and welcome back to the Empower Her podcast. It is the thick of December. We are almost at the Christmas, New Year's holidays. I'm personally super excited. I've always loved the holidays. I just love the decorations, the holiday spirit. I love the food. I love, just spending time at home with people or doing fun activities that you care about. And I will say it hasn't always been easy for me. I've had my ups and downs with my family over the last 10 plus years since I've moved out. And we happen to be in a good spot now, which I'm so thankful for. And I've put a lot of work into, I've gone to therapy with my mom. I've set boundaries with my family. I've done a lot of things to get to a place where I feel good about it. But it is challenging and it is hard sometimes with family. And I have in-laws now. I mean, they've been in my life since I've been with my husband, but now they're officially my in-laws since we got married. And, they've tested me the last year, I would say. And so I've had to set boundaries. I've had to make decisions that not everyone liked. I've had to have difficult conversations. And I think this is what a lot of people experience. And I think that, if you love your family and you want to spend time with them, there are ways that you can set boundaries that are going to help all of you. And this is something that I always said is I felt like, and I learned this through therapy, that when I didn't set boundaries with my family, I actually felt more rigid, more cold, more constricted, because that was my way and my body's response for dealing with my boundaries not being respected, or the ones I had in my head, let's say, because I wasn't good at setting them. And I realized that once I started actually setting boundaries, saying no, really just being clear on what I want and what I don't want, I was able to have more fun with my family. I was able to be more myself and not feel so constricted and not feel so tense and heated. I mean, there were so many times where I just went into the situations feeling anxious and, tired, and I didn't want to deal with it. I was on edge. Now it's not like that because I have those boundaries. So I really wanted to talk about boundaries today and give you some tips on how you can set boundaries. And these are tips that you can use whether you're spending the holidays with your family, whether you just talk to them, whether you're going to be in a hotel close by, whether you're going to spend 2 weeks in the same house with them. It doesn't matter what your situation is, friends, family, anyone close to you. I want to talk about boundaries that you can set because I think it's really important. And I also think a lot of times we don't know what boundaries we can set. We don't know that we can set this boundary or that boundary. So hopefully it's also some inspiration today about the type of boundaries that you can set, right? Because sometimes we don't even know that that's something we can set. I mean, when I was in therapy and my therapist told me boundaries that I could set, I was shocked. I was I can do that. And she was like, yeah, you can. So I've learned a lot over the years and I want to talk through them. I've divided the boundaries up into different categories that I want to talk about. Y'all know I love a list, so I have a list I'm going to share it with you today, and we're going to talk through them. So let's get into it. So let's start first with some time boundaries. So the first time boundary you can set is limiting the visit that you're going to have, limiting the duration of the visit and communicating it. So for example, if you're going to dinner, you can say, we're coming for dinner, but we can only stay till 8 p.m. Or, if you're going to see your family, like say, okay, we're arriving on the 24th and we're leaving on the 27th. We can't stay longer than that, right? Like being super clear up front is important. And I think being clear up front actually helps the situation because then you make sure everyone is clear on the expectations and you're not there on the 27th and you're like, we're going to leave, and they're freaking out like, why are you leaving? And it causes drama, right? But if everyone knows ahead of time, it's clear and it's not a surprise and you're setting that boundary. It's also sometimes easier to set the boundary over the phone, over text, rather than when you're in person. The next time boundary you can set is take time for yourself. So whether you're visiting your family by yourself, whether you have a partner, take time either by yourself or just with a partner, the two of you doing what you want to do, going for a walk, reading, going to a coffee shop, doing activities. You do not need to spend 24/7 with your family at all times. I feel like that's such a myth that you need to be with them. And, especially when you're there for multiple days or even like longer, a week or two, you do not need to be together 24/7. It is okay to take time by yourself or time with, your partner or your sister or your mom separately or whoever. You don't need to be all together all the time. The next set of tips is for emotional boundaries. So the first tip is avoid certain topics that you feel like are sensitive or that you don't want to talk about, right? Politics is a big one this season. There's a lot of families that have different political views, and that can be a really sore subject. And it's okay to steer clear of these, right? You can say something like, let's talk about something else. This feels too heavy for the holidays, right? Whatever that is. This can also go to topics you don't want to talk about, right? I grew up, my mom's Hungarian, so I have a half Hungarian family, and talking about your weight and what you look like when you're going to get married, have kids, all those things, those are normal, quote unquote, normal topics that they would talk about. And I had to get to a point where I said, I will not be talking about my weight anymore. I do not know how much I weigh. I don't know if I've lost or gained weight. I don't want to talk about this anymore. And I made it very clear with my family that that wasn't a topic that I was going to talk about. Now we're married, so people ask me, are you having kids soon? And I honestly, what I would always say is like, in 10 years, maybe in 10 years, or maybe in 20 years, like as a joke, because I just want them to get off my back. If you don't want to say something funny like that, you can just say, not sure, or I don't really want to talk about it, or you'll know when it happens or whatever, right? The next thing is step away when needed. So this goes kind of like to the point of taking time to yourself, but from an emotional perspective, if a conversation or an interaction is feeling overwhelming, you can literally get up and leave. Like you do not need to be in the same room. You can go outside for a walk, go hang out with your friends if you're in your hometown, like do something else that doesn't involve you being stuck with people if you're feeling like those conversations or interactions are getting to a point where, you're not feeling comfortable with it. That's, we don't want that to happen. That's just going to cause more drama, more fights. Take time, cool off, reset yourself, journal, meditate, do what you need to do. And then you can come back to the situation when you're feeling better and hopefully they've, stopped talking about the conversation. The next set of boundaries you can set is physical boundaries, okay? So create personal space, right? Again, if you're staying with family or close to family, have a designated quiet area where you can recharge. Like if you have your own room, that's great. Or have like a place where you can go, like a coffee shop down the street or a friend's house you can sneak off to. Have a dedicated safe space that you've already decided beforehand where you can go whenever you need a physical break, okay? And then the next one is, if you can, I know not everyone can, but choose where you sleep. So if you can opt for a hotel or an Airbnb, that's obviously a great option. So you don't have to be, in the same physical space as your family all the time. But I understand that that's not always possible financially. And sometimes you just want to stay with family, right? Like that's also fine. So of course, like do what you can. But if you can, really create that personal space in some way, that's obviously going to be ideal, just so you have somewhere safe to go, somewhere to be, somewhere where you can kind of, be on your own. The next set of boundaries is financial boundaries. So I feel like we don't talk about this enough. This is something that I actually talk a lot about with my family, and I'm so glad that we do. So an example is set expectations for gifts. A lot of times, and I think we talk about this a lot with like weddings and stuff, but I don't think we talk about this enough with like Christmas and like the holidays, is setting gift expectations. So be upfront about what the budget is, right? You could say like, we're doing small gifts this year. You could say one gift per person. You could say up to, $20 or $50 or whatever. My family, we do not always do gifts. Like this year we're traveling. So we just said, we're not doing gifts because everyone's spending money to travel and all be together. So we said, we're not doing gifts. We always do cards, and I love doing cards. Like I'm very much a handwritten card person. I will write handwritten cards to everyone for every holiday, like Christmas, their birthdays. Like I love doing that. And I love writing like to my husband, like basically like it's a Christmas card, but it's like a love letter basically. And I always date them, and I keep all the cards I've ever gotten since I started collecting cards when I was like 12. My grandma would always give us cards like for Valentine's Day, St. Patrick's Day, like always. And I absolutely loved it. And it was so special. And so I've been doing that as well. So what I did last year was I actually did like a holiday card. Do you remember when like, I don't know if people still do this, but we used to like do photos, and then we would like send a holiday card to people in the mail. And that's what I did last year, is we had a picture and I created a holiday like card from it. I just did it on Canva, and then I mailed it to my family last year because I didn't spend Christmas with my family last year. And then to my husband's family, we like gave it to them in person. And it was just like, it's such a nice little like touch. And, I'd write a note on the back. So this year I did the same thing. We did a little Christmas photo shoot in November, and I ended up making holiday cards again. So I'm going to be giving those to everybody, writing a nice little note. And that's what we do. We don't spend money on gifts for everybody. There's a lot of us together. It's just, we feel like we can spend that money better on like doing activities together. But of course, like if you want to do gifts, great. But I think setting that expectation is really important. And the next thing with like setting those financial boundaries is saying no to expensive activities. So if you don't have money or don't want to spend money on a costly outing or activity that doesn't align with your finances, you do not need to do it, period. Just because your family's doing it, just because people in your hometown are doing it during the holidays, you do not need to do it, right? Like you don't need to feel pressure to do those expensive activities if you don't want to or you don't have the financial means. And again, this is something that can be communicated upfront as well if you don't feel comfortable in the moment. Again, over the phone, over text, just being sure. Or everyone discusses a budget of like, hey, we have $100 to do activities together. Like, what are we going to do? And then you sit down and decide what you're going to do, right? Like something like that is also a really great thing to do. The next type of boundary you can set is an activities boundary. Okay. So this is like saying no to overscheduling. Okay. Because sometimes when, we're in the holidays, we can be overcommitted, overbooked. Maybe it's more of like, I think it's less in the States because everyone lives far away. But like in Hungary, for example, it's a pretty small country, right? So you could probably get from like one place to another in like 4 hours. So if you have like in-laws, right? You have your family here, you have in-laws, and we all live in different cities. You could theoretically spend Christmas like 24th, 25th, 26th driving around the country to different places. And that can be a lot. And I know a lot of people in Europe do that. In the States, again, not so much just because you have to fly places and everything is so far away. But if you still feel like things are overscheduled, there's too many activities, whatever it is, you can say no, right? Like you can say no and decline invitations if you need downtime. So for example, like you can say, we can't make it to brunch, but we'll see you at dinner, right? Like it's really about setting those boundaries. It's not about not spending time with people, but it's about deciding what kind of time you're going to spend and where. You do not need to do 5 million things during the holidays. And then again, just choose your activities. Prioritize those traditions and events that actually bring you joy. Just because you did a tradition when you were a child, if it no longer brings you joy, if it causes you stress and anxiety, you do not need to do it. You can skip it, right? The whole point of being adults is taking what worked from our childhood and using it, and taking what didn't and then skipping over it and then adding new traditions, right? We do not need to do things the exact same way that we did things when we were younger or that our parents did things. I know it can be kind of hard, especially when we have traditions, and it's not about saying, oh, what you did was bad, or I don't want to do that because it's shitty, whatever. It's just saying, no, I really enjoyed XYZ traditions and I'm adding these new traditions into our repertoire, and this is what's going to be for the holidays, and this is great, And then the next set of boundaries is communication boundaries, which again, we kind of talked about, and everything should be communicated, but just some examples of expressing your needs, right? Be clear and kind about what you need to feel comfortable, right? So for example, you could say, we'd like to keep this visit short and sweet since it's been a busy month. Or, I just had a baby, so we're only going to stay for a few hours for dinner, right? Like whatever it is. But be clear beforehand, because if you're clear beforehand, it's going to be easier. And this is what I talked about at the beginning with communication. I always am someone that believes in setting boundaries beforehand. I talked about this in another episode, or actually maybe a video I did on TikTok, that I set boundaries for everything, whether it was dating, whether it was friendships. I always ahead of time would set the boundary because I wanted everyone to know what they could expect from me. I didn't want there to be any confusion on what they could expect from me, right? And then in terms of communication boundaries is limiting phone calls and check-ins. Sometimes around the holidays, especially when we're gearing up to it, families constantly checking in, constantly wanting to know the schedule. There's a lot going back and forth. You can limit those phone calls. You can set specific times of day where you say, okay, at 6 p.m. every night is when I'm going to call everyone back or respond to everyone's text, or let's only talk about this once a week and catch up, right? Like you can set those boundaries, okay? So these were my list of boundaries that you can set, tips and tricks. As I said, I love the holidays, but I know it can be hard. I've had several hard holidays where I felt stressed, anxious. I felt just really constricted in what was happening. I wasn't able to set boundaries. And I want to acknowledge that I know a lot of people feel that way, despite even if you love the holidays and being around your family, it can be challenging, especially when you're in your 20s and 30s, right? You've moved away from home for the last few years and it's like you're on your own and you're independent and you go back home and parents and people don't really always understand those boundaries, right? Or even if you're older, people just don't always understand boundaries, but it's really important for you to set them, and it's really important for you to stick to them, and it's really important for you to determine what you want and what you don't want ahead of time so that you can have the best possible outcome, okay? This was our last episode before Christmas. There will be no new episode next week because I'm going to be enjoying the holidays. I hope you're going to be enjoying the holidays. There will be an episode on the 30th, right before New Year's. I'm going to have a fun New Year's episode talking about manifesting goals. I'm super excited. But if you are celebrating Christmas, I wish you a very, very Merry Christmas. Happy holidays to whatever you're celebrating. I hope you have the best time. I hope you can re-energize, recharge, and, bring some positivity into your life. And we'll talk right before the new year, which I'm super, super excited about. Hope you have an amazing rest of the month, everyone, and we'll catch you in the next episode. And if you love this episode, don't forget to follow the podcast and leave a review. And of course, you can follow me at Coach Deanna DeBolt on TikTok and Instagram. I'll catch you next time.